Hello, students! Today, we're going to look at a very interesting story from your chapter on power sharing. It's the story of Belgium, a small country that had a really big problem with division, but they came up with a very unique and, a very powerful solution. So, let's see how they did it.
So, first things first, where exactly is Belgium? Well, it's a small country in Europe. To give you an idea, it's even smaller than our state of Haryana. And as you can see on the map here, it has borders with France, the Netherlands, Germany, and Luxembourg. But its small size hides a very big, very complicated story about its people.
And this situation brings us to a really important question, doesn't it? How can people who speak different languages, who have different cultures, how can they all live together peacefully in just one country? Well, Belgium found a very special answer, and that is exactly what we are going to explore.
Okay, before we go any further, there's one word we need to understand very clearly, and that word is ethnic. You see, an ethnic group is basically a group of people who share a common culture. It's not about religion, it's not about which country you're from, it's all about a shared culture, a shared background. Please remember this word, it's very important for our story.
All right, so let's set the scene. What was Belgium actually like back then? We're going to look at how the country was divided by language and culture, because that is where the whole problem started. So, if you look at the whole country, the picture is something like this. About 59% of the people spoke Dutch. The next biggest group, at 40%, spoke French, and there was a tiny 1% who spoke German. So the main thing to remember here is that for the country as a whole, the Dutch speakers were the majority.
Okay, so we know who lives there, but where do they live? If you look at the map again, see this yellow part at the top? That's the Flemish region, and that's where most of the Dutch speakers live. And this red part at the bottom is the Wallonia region, which is home to most of the French speakers. This division is a very important part of the story.
Now you might be thinking, so what? People speak different languages all over the world. What's the problem? Well, in Belgium, this was a very big problem. These language differences led to some serious tensions. Let's find out why.
Here's where the tension really started. The French-speaking community, even though they were the minority in the country, they were actually richer and more powerful. On the other hand, the Dutch-speaking community, who were the majority, only got the benefits of good education and economic development much, much later. As you can imagine, this created a lot of anger and resentment.
So, all this unfairness, this resentment, it didn't just stay quiet. It started to cause big problems, especially during the 1950s and 1960s. The two communities started to drift further and further apart, and this made the whole country very unstable. And just when you thought it couldn't get more complicated, it did. Let's talk about the capital city, Brussels. In Brussels, the situation was completely the opposite of the rest of the country. Here, a huge 80% of the people were French-speaking and only 20% spoke Dutch. This created a very unique, a very special kind of problem. Think about it like this. Let's say in your entire school, most students speak Hindi. But inside your own classroom, almost everyone speaks English. Who is the majority now? Well, it depends on where you are, right? In the school or in the classroom. That's exactly what was happening in Belgium. Dutch speakers were the majority in the country, but a minority in the capital city. So let's just stop and think for a second. What usually happens in a situation like this? The Dutch majority could have tried to force its rules on everyone else. This could have led to a very messy fight, maybe even a civil war, or the country splitting into two. It could have gotten very, very bad. But that's not what happened. And this is what makes the story of Belgium so special. The leaders in Belgium saw the danger, and they chose a very different path, a much wiser path. This was the turning point in their story. And that path was the path of accommodation. This is a very important word, students. Please remember it, accommodation. It means they decided not to fight for domination. Instead, they recognized that there were differences in their country, and they decided to respect those differences and find a way to live together. Now, this didn't happen overnight. It wasn't easy at all. Between 1970 and 1993, that's more than 20 years, they changed their constitution. Not once, not twice, but 4 times. They were really working hard to create a new set of rules that everyone could agree to. So, what was this amazing solution they came up with? It was a new model for sharing power. It was a little complicated, but let's break it down so it's easy to understand. Okay, so their model had 4 main parts. Think of them as 4 key elements. First, they made sure there were equal ministers from both groups in the central government. Second, they gave more power to the state governments.
Third, Brussels got its own separate government. And finally, they created something brand new, a community government. Let's look at each one by one.
The first principle was equal representation. What does this mean? It's simple. The Constitution said that in the main, central government, the number of Dutch-speaking ministers and French-speaking ministers had to be exactly the same. Equal numbers. Total fairness at the top.
And this led to another very important rule: no unilateral decisions. Now, that's a big word, but it just means one side cannot make a decision all by itself. For any important new laws, you needed a yes vote from the majority of both groups. So no single community could just do whatever it wanted. They had to work together.
Okay, now for the most creative part of their plan, something called a community government. This was a third type of government, and it was very clever. It was elected by people belonging to one language group, no matter where in Belgium they lived. So it didn't matter if you were a French speaker living in the Dutch area, you could still vote for your own French community government. And this government would handle things like schools, culture, and language for its community.
I know, it sounds a little complicated, doesn't it? But the big question is, did it actually work? What was the result of this complex power-sharing arrangement?
Well, the results were fantastic. This whole idea of accommodation, it worked. It helped to avoid fighting between the two big communities. It saved the country from breaking apart. And most importantly, it kept Belgium united as one country. And you know what? The rest of the world noticed this success. When many different European countries came together to form the European Union, guess which city they chose for their headquarters? That's right, Brussels. This was a huge compliment. It was like the whole of Europe was saying, Belgium, you have shown us the way. You've shown us how to bring different people together.
So what is the main lesson we learned from this whole story of Belgium? It's a very simple but very powerful idea. The unity of a country is only possible when you respect the feelings and the interests of all the different communities that live there. Sharing power doesn't make a country weak. Actually, it's what makes a country strong and united.